Can anyone hear me? Hi, Jillian. Hi, Kath. Where are you?
All right, I think we're successfully streaming, I believe. So we'll bring the meeting to order now. I'm sorry, wait a minute, let me find my screen. I'm talking to my computer without seeing anybody on my screen. All right, hello everybody. So we'll bring this meeting to order. This is the Board of Education meeting of January 5th, 2021. Happy New Year, everybody. It's good to see you. So just to let you know, this meeting is streaming, and I forgot to start the recording, but I will start the recording. So we're doing both. I just ask that all participants mute themselves, and I see everybody's muted at the moment. So that'll just prevent meeting interference, and you can unmute yourself if you're on the phone using *6. I also ask that everyone wait to be recognized by the chair before speaking so that people listening by phone are able to identify the person talking. This meeting is being held remotely or virtually with access by phone or streaming as indicated in the agenda. So we'll start off with our Pledge of Allegiance, and it'll take me a minute to pull up a flag for us, but I'll do that. And then we can say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and then as usual, I will be the one to share our commitment to community. And then next week we'll have somebody else do it. So our commitment to the community is that as citizens of our community, we will conduct ourselves in accordance with Newtown's core character attributes as displayed in our character tree. We will be responsible for our actions and show respect for each other. We will interact peacefully, productively, and politely. We will be trustworthy and honest and show compassion toward others. Newtown's continued success is contingent upon our ability to persevere, to follow through with our commitments, and to stay focused on the greater good. All right, so having said that, I want to make one change in the agenda for tonight if there's no objection to it. I was mistaken about when we needed to conclude the charter revision discussion. It does not need to conclude this evening. So if there is no objection, I'd like to move that to the end of new business to see how much we can get through. And then knowing that we can put off some of it towards the December 19th meeting. And that way we can get all of our presenters in before we have that discussion. So if there are no objections, we'll do that. And that'll bring us to our consent agenda. So I will entertain a motion on that.
I move that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda, which includes the donations to Reed Intermediate School, Newtown Middle School, and Newtown High School, and the correspondence report.
Second.
All right, so Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, Mr. Cruson seconds the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, I think that was everyone. Are there any nays? No, so that motion passes unanimously with the board members who are here. I think we're missing Ms. Leidline and Ms. Harriman Stites are not here. Okay. And that'll bring us to our public participation. So I see a couple of phone numbers. Just during the first public participation, the board welcomes commentary regarding items that are on the agenda. After being recognized, if you could just please share your name and address for the record, we'd appreciate that. We ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. And then during the second public participation, you're welcome to address anything that is on the agenda or not on the agenda, and you may introduce items for the board to consider in the future. We don't engage in dialogue during either public comment period, but you can always email the board if you require more information. So is there anyone at this time who would like to address the board? And you can unmute yourself using *6. All right, sensing none, we'll close out public participation. And that will bring us to the chair report. I don't have a whole lot to report on, just that tomorrow night, the Legislative Council will take up the discussion of the CIP and notably the Hawley HVAC project, as well as anything else that is on that 10-year CIP plan. So we'll be there for that. And I just wanted to thank Deb Zukowski for joining the process for the interviews for the Director of Technology, and those will be taking place this week. And that's it for the chair report. I don't know if anybody has any questions. All right, sensing none, we'll move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Dr. Koo. Good evening, everyone. And again, welcome back and Happy New Year. As you know, we're back in full for our K-6 students and staff and hybrid for our 7 through 12. And anecdotally, I just in talking with principals and staff, it's gone quite well for the first couple of days. While there are a number of new cases, as you know, of COVID in the community, a last look at the Ed Advance report from the state figures, as of January 5th, Newtown has about 30.6 cases per 100,000. And our secondary indicator is a positivity rate versus the number of tests that are given. And we're at a 4% rate, which has been very close to where we've been. This is good news and certainly a bit different from, I think, what was expected when we would return. And I get that it's still early, but I wanted to share that. If we compare that data from the date of, say, December 18th, we were at 42, almost 43% cases in that 14-day average. So we actually see it's a bit lower at this point. And even if we look at just prior to Thanksgiving, we were at 33%, so even slightly higher than we are today. So we do post these reports on our website. Each time they come from Ed Advance, and those figures do come from the state. So it is good for staff and the community to see those. Again, we have sent reminders, just so you know, to parents and staff about how critical it is now more than ever to continue to use the mitigation strategies and health safety measures that we've talked about all year long, both at home and at school, self-checks, temperature checks, face masks, social distancing, hand washing, including one of the things that we've emphasized with our staff is to use those added protections again of desk shields and the face shields for all of our teachers. We do meet, just so you know, I do meet through a weekly webinar with members of the Connecticut DPH, and just met yesterday, I believe it was. And there are testing sites that they have given to as a priority for teachers and for teachers and other healthcare workers. So teachers are prioritized in some of those areas. We also have our own, as you know, health-based clinics. So we are being able to test teachers there as well and students. And they are preparing to ensure when planning is on, we are planning right now for vaccinations for our staff, but we are waiting to hear officially that teachers have now been put into a more prioritized vaccine rollout. And that would be as potential essential workers. That's not official right now. We keep hearing about that, but even the DPH hasn't actually come out and said when that will actually be official. But we will share that information when we have it, certainly with our staff and with the community as well. And just a clarification about our dashboard. Some questions have arisen, not only in our staff, but in the community. But I just wanted to say that the purpose of that was only to provide information as it relates to cases in our school community that are both confirmed and reported. Over the break, there were cases certainly, and until it reaches Donna Culber and reaches in Dalton, so she can flag those, there is somewhat of a lag time. When we're in school, it's less of a lag time. As soon as it's reported and as soon as we've done the contact tracing and it's official, then that gets put up. So Ann Dalton is also sending communication out tomorrow, one communication to parents and one to staff. Again, that's just one of the components of that communication is the dashboard, but she's also going to talk a little bit about, again, reminding them about the mitigation strategies and the potential preparation for vaccinations as well. I will tell you that the 10-day quarantine is going to help us, including our staffing needs. And just so you know, we had 15 new community members step up to sign up as substitutes, and we will surely use them. We've already started to use them on day one, so that's really great. And again, I want to thank the community for that. I also want to go back to something that was mentioned at a previous meeting. It might have been during public participation, but I want to emphasize that our district follows quarantining as any other district, and that is those parameters come directly from CDC and the Connecticut DPH. So we do not over quarantine anyone. We certainly follow what we're supposed to do, and this is used by most health directors in every district in alignment again with DPH and the CDC guidelines. We do and will continue to take quarantining seriously for the safety of our staff and our students, especially now as numbers climb, or at any time, the potential for a more virulent strain out there that you've heard about in the news. We want to make sure that we're doing the right thing when it comes to quarantining. So I just wanted to mention that. On another note, we did communicate the ongoing 3-hour early release, as you know, on Wednesdays. One was in a November communication by me, another was followed up, I believe, by Ann Uberti. And we will continue to do this to maintain equity in teachers' schedules, especially because we have a 7 through 12 tentative schedule to move to all in on January 19th. And that schedule includes an early release daily. And on Wednesdays, we wanted to make sure that it was equitable. And I know that the high school and middle school had to move to, I believe, Tom, an 11:30 release, as opposed to the 12:32. And that is so that obviously the entire district can't release at the same time. So a lot of the reasons we've done this is because teachers, number one, do still need that planning time, especially as I'm going to point out, we do have a cohort B that will remain and probably remain throughout the entire year. So teachers are still working with kids and the students in the classroom and those students that are remote in what we're calling cohort D. We now have 709 students in cohort D, which is close to 300 more, 407 from October. So I just got those numbers today. I wanted to make sure that I brought that forward publicly so you understand there are more and more families for very good reason, their own reasons, that are holding students back now in remote learning. And again, as this is temporary, These numbers will fluctuate, obviously, as time goes on and people feel more confident. But I wanted to make sure that you all heard that, and I will certainly put those numbers up on our website as well. It does actually give you the actual numbers in every single cohort, and that's A and B, as well as the C cohort, which includes special education students. And again, we'll monitor our status. That's what we do. But you know, we are today not very different from where we were last month. So we hope to move 7 through 12 back to full time with the modified schedule I just discussed. And again, this will also be dependent on making sure that everyone's safe in doing so. These are decisions, again, that we make. I don't make in isolation. I make those in tandem with the local health director, as you know. Finally, our staffing report. We had, as you saw, I believe that came in additional materials. We have had no retirements this month, no resignations, and one new hire, which is a special education flex teacher, and that's the program at the high school. We did have, again, 15 new substitutes in total. And again, these were community members and parents who stepped up. But that will all be reflected in our January report. So I know that was longer than normal, but I wanted to get in as much as I could, important information. So I'll certainly entertain any questions.
Are there any questions? Yeah, Mr. Cruson.
I wanted to ask, because I've heard in many cases talk about prioritizing teachers for vaccines, which that's great. I'm glad that they're having that talk even outside of the Connecticut DPH. But has there been any talk about where they're going to put the rest of the staff needed to run the district and run the schools? Because as we all know, that there's a lot more than just the teachers who are in regular contact.
So I know that people like bus drivers certainly have been talked about in the same vein as teachers, all of the support specialists, basically all, you know, Board of Ed employees. And that would include not just teachers, but paras, all, you know, those who are working with children. But again, it's not official, Dan. I'm sure you're asking, are you asking for things like bus drivers and people outside of the teaching realm?
I'm not asking if anything's official. I realize there's nothing official. I just, I've been concerned because all of the talk that I've been seeing is teachers. I'm concerned no one's giving consideration to the paras, the bus drivers, the specialists, the ones who are in regular contact with students other than teachers.
So what I've heard, I've only heard them use the teachers, but there has been discussion on a greater pool of Board of Ed employees that would also figure into that.
Okay.
That would be in that essential worker. I think it's like 1B, if I'm not mistaken. But I can ask that question on my next, because we meet weekly with the DPH, and as we get closer, I'll make sure that's the next question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just want to make sure that they're taking into consideration that there's more to a school district than just the teacher.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a great question. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Mr. D'Elia.
Dr. Rodriguez, are you comfortable with the level of subs you have now? Do you feel good about it?
Right now I am. We've got more coming in. So those 15 were in that 1 week. It was just amazing how people stepped up very quickly. But as time goes on, so we've opened the AppleTrack system, so you don't even have to. That was one of the things that was happening. I think there was in the past, you had to stop in and fill out forms, and there's no reason to do that. Even for daily subs, we do everything else online, not because of COVID, because we have the system. So we've opened that up to be able to do that. They still have to come in fingerprinting, but so does every new hire. So I see there are more in the loop coming in every day. So I think I feel really good about where we are.
Thank you. Great.
Anyone else have questions? All right. Sensing no more questions. Thank you, Dr. Rodrigue. We
Welcome.
will move on to committee reports. I don't think there were too many committee meetings. I know there was the ad hoc charter revision. And there were a couple meetings for that as well as CNI, but both of those we will, well, yeah, Mr. Voros, did you want to, were there other items that are not on the agenda that you wanted to address?
No, I'm fine because the CNI that we had on the 22nd will be done under new business, and I'd like to encourage my colleagues to endorse the motion to move the middle school schedule forward, but we'll discuss that during new business.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Dr. Rodrigue, did you want to?
There was something, can I add, that I didn't put on my superintendent's report that I wanted to
Yeah.
say, and that had to do with the devices, which I'm sorry, and Ann, you can jump in certainly with that. But we had originally reported the way we were working everything out with devices moving forward is that we would have given currently the freshmen this year devices. And then from that point forward, was it 7th grade, Ann? Not 8th grade, right? 7th graders would then get devices and they would move forward. And the thought was all the way through to senior year, and then they would take them. Because of the complexity of what was happening with devices, both this year and looking at some that we even had to return, others that we're looking at, and what's the best year to give it out. We changed, so we really had a rethinking. I talked with Ann and Carmela. So we will not be giving devices this year to freshmen. They're going to work with what they have now, and we've already we've given devices to those students who don't have them. We will replenish the carts at the high school so that everyone has access to the same number of devices they had before COVID. And then from this point forward, starting next year, every freshman will get a brand new device. That will take it through their 4 years. I think that's the right place to give it. They will hold it for 4 years, and then we can still utilize those devices because they do have a 6-year minimum window, and then we can replenish them in other areas. So it's a nice consistent loop. So I just wanted to make sure that we were clear that's what we're doing moving forward. So there's been a change since we last spoke. Ann, did you want to add anything to that, or did I catch it all? I don't. Okay. Thanks.
All right. Did anybody have any questions on the change in devices? Technology? Okay. So returning to committee reports, were there any other committee reports that need to be updated? I don't think so. Okay. So that'll bring us to our student representatives report. Hello, Ms. Fleur and Mr. Jerfy. Thank you for being with us. Would you like to update the board on where things are?
Sure. Good evening, board members and Dr. Rodrigue. I hope you guys all had a happy and healthy holiday break. I am very glad to be back at school, and while I'm personally not going in yet for a couple of weeks, it was great to see all my teachers and classmates again online. Classes went as usual today, and there wasn't any delay or trouble getting back to schedule, which was really nice. In terms of college applications, I believe pretty much all of them have been sent out, and a lot of students have been hearing back. So far, I'm hearing a lot of good news from my classmates. I look forward to hopefully going back to everyone in school on Jan 19th. Personally, I've been finding it crazy to think that us seniors only have 1 semester left in high school, and I'm very excited for the next few months.
Okay, I'll continue. So good evening, members of the Board of Ed and Superintendent Dr. Rodriguez. Happy New Year. So this week we returned to school. I was in school and I'm cohort A, so I went in on Monday and Tuesday. It definitely felt good to be back, and hopefully we can keep this trend going and go back to all in person on January 19th. It almost felt like I heard a couple students saying that it almost felt like the first day of school again because we hadn't been there since before Thanksgiving. But I think once the first class period started and the bell rung, everyone hit their groove again, and it was back to learning in person, seeing your teachers, seeing your classmates, and it was great. The top concern, or really only concern I heard so far from students returning to school in person, was about lunch. So I think we got notice that all of the tents outside were put down because it is obviously simply too cold to eat outside, which would just not be enjoyable. So I think students were worried about seating because the tables in the cafeteria, old caf and new caf, that formerly would fit around 6 to 8 people now only fit 2 because of the social distancing protocols. But happily, I can say I ate in new caf on Monday. I found a seat, no issue. There were even 1 or 2 tables still empty on the stage. I do have a feeling that old caf might have been a little bit more crowded because it has always been students' go-to lunch spot to meet up with friends. But we were also told that if we had any trouble finding a seat, we could go to any teacher and they would find us somewhere to comfortably eat. So I heard the concern in the morning, but by the time we got to lunch, everything was good and I was happy to see no problems there. As for sports, they have been quiet for quite some time now since fall sports ended and winter sports have been postponed. But the CIAC is planning to meet this Thursday to finalize the start dates for winter sports. As of right now, basketball, swim, gymnastics, hockey, and indoor track are still scheduled to begin on January 19th. But wrestling, cheer, and dance have been pushed back to a later date at the end of February. And the plan right now, before their next meeting, is that each sport will have a shortened 12-game season. With all of the new challenges that this year has brought, it is crazy to think we are almost done with the first semester already. So quarter 2 is ending on January 22nd, and quarter 3, as well as semester 2, will start the following Monday, January 25th. Students right now can look forward to having no midterms this year, but prepare to have some final projects in classes that are ending this semester. For seniors like Rochelle and I, which he already mentioned, January 25th will start our last semester of high school, which is still crazy to think about and exciting at the same time. But seniors also started delivering their capstone projects this Monday. And so far I've heard nothing but positives. So, which I know was a concern for some of the seniors over the summer, but now that the presentations are starting, it's great to hear that they are coming back with positive feedback, since it's the first year that it has been made a graduation requirement. So one of my friends said he was the first to go in his class Monday morning, and he would have liked to go over the presentation time limit if he could, as he just loved talking about what he accomplished with his project, which I think is great because I think that's the goal of the project, is to do something you're passionate about and something that you can just keep talking about. So it's great to hear such positives. And I think for some students, it was a little bit on the other side because they had to cancel some of their original project ideas, like internships that got canceled because of COVID, but teachers helped us pick something else in return so that all of the projects are still right on track to finish. And other seniors like myself who don't have the senior experience or capstone class this semester, but have it next semester, will have the chance to present in the spring. And the presentations are in your actual senior experience class. So not only are you presenting to your teacher and some of the adults on the capstone board, but you also get to present to your peers, the people in your class, the students, which I think is great because I think it's easier public speaking to people your own age, and it'll kind of give them more people to talk about and fill up the room, which will definitely make the presentation easier. The grading for these projects was also changed just a little while ago from pass with distinction to only pass and fail. But however, if your presentation does fail, you will have the opportunity to present to the board at a later date. Not to worry. It has been a bit of a slow start back from break as far as clubs and activities go, but it's good to see some organizations starting to think about future events and meetings as the schedules change. So for example, when we go back to opening in full on January 19th, the freshmen will need to become aware of the A through H rotating schedule, as they have yet to be exposed to this because of our hybrid and all online. So the link crew leaders are setting up a date to hopefully go into the freshman advisories and give them some helps and helpful tips to learning the schedule and learning the ways as it usually went A through H from the juniors and seniors who have lots of experience with it and who know it best. As a link crew leader, I can update you on how the transition goes and how back to school goes since I am in person cohort A. And that is all for my report this week.
Great, thank you both for the update on, it just dawned on me that it's been so long since we have had the middle school and high school in person. So that's neat to hear. Are there any questions from board members?
Yes, Michelle, I have
Mr.
one for
Boros.
Jillian.
Yeah.
Jillian, would you mind trying to get some sort of a schedule where board members might be able to pop in and hear some of these capstone presentations? If that's something that can be arranged and you can put together a schedule for us, I think that would be great, because I in particular would be interested in going to hear some of them. So
Sure.
if that works out, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, I know the people who run it, so I can email them, and they have to live stream the class anyway, so I'm sure I can make a schedule and project names, and those will be going until the semester switches on January 25th, and then they'll be again in the spring. So you can try and catch some now and then again later on.
Yeah, great. Thank you, dear. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, sensing none, we will move on. Thank you for the report. Glad to hear from you. Glad to have you in the new year.
Thank you.
All right, so that will bring us to our old business, which includes the COVID update. I don't know, Dr. Rodriguez, did you have, I know you spoke a little bit.
I was overzealous. I put everything in my superintendent's report, but I did want to, again, it's certainly challenging for staff and others to come back when there are rising cases in Connecticut and lots of sort of dismal news sometimes you hear, but I did point out that we weren't as high as we thought we would be following a holiday. But I just did want to point out that we brought in Stephanie Strover, who is a parent. She spoke at one of the last board meetings. She has a very strong background in public health and expertise in the area of epidemiology and microbiology. And I was able to bring her to a Google meeting with both the teacher and the parent, the teacher and the paraprofessional executive boards of their unions, to speak to them really just about the safety as it pertains to schools, the use of PPE and the real importance behind that. And answer questions, for those paras and those teachers, just things that were on their minds when it comes to, students eating without a mask, or the social distancing. What if we can't? What if I have to work closer? Many of those came from special education paraprofessionals. So it was just really wonderful. Ann Dalton was also on both of those calls, and it was really wonderful to hear the questions that were asked and to hear the answers. And I think, even though Ann Dalton made a comment just today that even though we might say some of the same things, it does really, I think, have more power and more weight when it comes from someone of that background and that expertise. So that went really well, and I just thought I'd share that. And again, we are looking at bringing in other presenters, a doctor from Griffin Hospital. Again, some community members and I are trying to coordinate a date for that, and that could be an open webinar. So, you know, I think the more we do that and bring real information in a timely fashion, it builds that kind of confidence level for teachers who are working. You know, as you said, Mr. Cruson, they're all right there, and you know, they are in the trenches, everyone, and so the more we can build their confidence, the better. So everything else I said in my super report. So I realized that I'm like, I don't have any more to say.
It's all COVID, everything.
Yes.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? No. Okay. All right, thank you. And then we would have gone on to our discussion on the charter revision suggestions, but we'll skip over that and move on to our new business. And that'll bring us to our discussion and possible action on the Newtown Middle School schedule. I think before we put a motion on the table, why don't we just go through the presentation and information, and then we can have a discussion.
You don't want me to make a motion before the presentation?
Well, the presentation is not really part of our board discussion. I mean, the presentation is.
Okay, I'll hold off.
If that's okay with it, I mean, we can.
No, I'll wait till after.
Okay.
But
So,
I think that the motion should be made before any questions are asked, correct?
yeah, we can do it that way.
Okay.
As soon as, we'll finish up the presentation and then make the motion and have discussion after that. So I believe, Mr. Einhorn, you are here to help us understand the schedule. I believe Mr. Ross is here and Ms. Zuberti can help us through this, but Mr. Einhorn, did you want to begin with the presentation? Start us off, or Ms. Zuberti?
Michelle, can you allow me to? Oh, it looks like I can share my screen.
Can you?
It wasn't there before, but it looks like it's there now. Because oh, no, it's not. It doesn't work.
I think you have to share it with her, right, Michelle?
Yeah. Does it work now?
Yes.
Okay.
So I will let Tom do the presentation, and Tom, if you just let me know when to move forward. Hopefully you're seeing the first slide.
Yes.
Sure,
Okay.
thank you. Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to allow us to present our proposed master schedule. We'd like to start to share a little bit about the whole process that we've gone through. And then obviously we want to highlight some of the benefits that we see from this new proposed schedule. And then obviously there we'll give time at the end for some questions. So Ann, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. So with any process, there's with the changes, we went through quite a number of steps in order to get to where we are now. We decided that looking at our current schedule, that while it's a great schedule, it didn't always provide us with all the things that we needed to have our schedule to do. So we spent some time over the summer and then put a committee together in September and started to look at some of the things that we would want in our new proposed schedule. So the committee is made up of many different stakeholders, from general ed, special ed, or interventionists, unified arts, para educators, parents, as well as building and central office administration. What we did is we first went out and we looked at our surrounding communities and what they have for their middle school schedules, and kind of get a better sense of the things that other schools are offering their students. We also put together a staff survey where we asked for input, and that input is ongoing, and that's important because as we start to, share the nuances with the staff, there are questions always along the way, and so we want to make sure we keep that input coming in as well. We looked at many different schedules, from block schedules to different rotating schedules. In the end, we looked at and created over 17 different schedules. And then looking at all those schedules, we came to a point where we feel the one that we have right now that we're proposing best meets our individual needs for us here in Newtown. If you could go to the next slide, Ian. So what we'd like to do now is spend a few moments going through a number of slides that will give you some information about some areas or elements, and then what our current schedule does, and then what the new schedule is proposed to do. And then obviously in that final column, you can see some of the benefits. So when we looked at instructional time, we looked at our current schedule, and we have roughly about 314 minutes for that schedule. With the new schedule, we're eliminating the learning lab, so that gives us a few extra minutes each day. And obviously, if you have increased time, the benefit is obviously it goes directly into additional instructional time. We also, through our surveys and looking at our needs, we realized that we need additional time for students to have intervention, especially in the areas of math and reading. So with our new proposed schedule, we'll be able to have a reading interventionist and a math interventionist at each grade level. And obviously, this is going to greatly help to balance the needs of the support for the needs of our students. And it's going to increase the opportunities to deliver intervention during a dedicated intervention block, which we're really excited about, that there's going to be a block for every cluster, which is going to be very taken in by our staff, because it's going to allow the interventionists to really be more efficient and being able to be with more kids throughout each day, which certainly is something we're looking forward to. We're also very excited about the idea of having additional support in the area of special education. Currently, a special education case manager supports 2 clusters. With our proposed new schedule, we're looking to have a special educator on each and every cluster. This too, again, will better balance the classes across all of the clusters, and the special education students will get direct instruction from their language arts teacher and their math teacher with the support of a special ed teacher in that class, so helping them meet their IEP goals. So essentially that would look like a co-taught class. So we're very, very excited about that. And because the students are going to be in more of their mainstream classes, they're also going to have more time with their typical peers, which is also a bonus of this new schedule. Next slide, please. One of the really interesting things that we learned by surveying surrounding communities is that most, or if not all, middle schools in the area have world language every day. And so that's something that we're very excited about. So currently, our schedule has 4 cluster teachers, but what we'd be looking to do is to add a world language teacher to each and every cluster for this proposed schedule, which then will allow us to have world language offered each and every day, which essentially doubles the amount of time that students will get world language compared to where we are now. As we said earlier, that this is something that our surrounding communities are doing. So we're looking that in 7th grade, students would complete the Spanish 1 curriculum, and then in 8th grade, they would complete the Spanish 2 curriculum. So we're really very, very excited about this opportunity. And it really also, because we're adding an additional teacher to the cluster configuration, it gives us a lot more flexibility as enrollment shift and declining and in increasing enrollment. So this kind of puts us in a position with that extra teacher on the cluster to balance class sizes or in each cluster, and it gives us a better way of balancing that over time. so that this way we can keep this model and this proposed schedule for a number of years into the future. We're also excited about an offering in world language, which we're calling Conversational Spanish, or C-SPAN for short. And this is an opportunity for our students that are in intervention that may not have been able to take world language in the past. So that this way students still can get their intervention maybe a few days a week, but then the remaining days they can take part in this C-SPAN class. So we're really excited that all of our students will have the opportunity to get some background in world language, which obviously helps them prepare for the high school requirement as well. So we're very excited about that development as well. Next slide, please. So with that being said, earlier we talked about the idea of providing that tiered intervention or SRBI support for students. Right now, because of the way our schedule is, it's sometimes difficult to schedule students in for support. But with a dedicated period that we can move kids easily in and out of that C-SPAN class if they need intervention, it's really great, because once an intervention is complete and the student has demonstrated that they are competent in the skills that we were trying to help them demonstrate, they can move right back into that class. So it's a really great opportunity for that flexibility for students to get the intervention when they need it, but then have a place to go back to once they've completed that. So we're very, very excited about that, as I said. And then another piece that we're looking at is that we're excited about is that we were looking at for other opportunities for our students regarding some opportunities with a special schedule that will be attached to our regular schedule. So once every 12 days, students will have an opportunity to work with all of their peers in a music ensemble. So all the students in band will meet, and then all the students in orchestra will be able to meet, and students in choir will be able to meet, and students that are not taking those will be able to have a few selective electives to meet. So we're excited about that. Our music department is very excited to have all of their groups together multiple times throughout the year, which is something that they do not have now and are looking forward to. And it's also a time for us to have a dedicated time for social and emotional learning. Then that could include our second step program. And we also have this schedule that allows our teachers to have some common planning time for grade level and department meetings, which is something that we always want to make sure that the schedule provides for our teachers as well. Some changes along the way as well is that we are sunsetting our family and consumer science, our FACS class, due to a retirement. And also we're realizing that we would like to have some additional time for our health, tech ed, and computer integration classes. So they're going to go from 22 classes to 30. So that's an additional 8 classes. And our teachers are very excited about that. Our health teacher is also looking at taking some of the components that were in the FACS curriculum, such as the nutritional unit, and pulling that into the health curriculum as well. So we're looking forward to some great opportunities with that. We do realize that there are a number of students that really enjoy that FACS class and potentially are looking to, augment their experience moving into culinary at the high school. So we're looking to offer a cooking club so that students that are interested in that can do that. And we're also looking at the potential of maybe bringing in some of our high school culinary students to kind of co-advise that club as well. So while we're losing FACS, we're gaining some important additional class times in those other areas. And then hopefully we can still get that cooking club together, which I know that many students will enjoy. And we wanted to point out that there are some staffing implications here. We're moving to 3 clusters at each grade level. So there's going to be some reduction in the overall cluster configurations. But with that being said, we're moving from a 4 teacher model on the cluster to a 5, so that positions us well for enrollment. We realize that with this, we also are making some adjustments, and there's some potential retirements, which will help offset some of the positions. And as I said earlier, we're looking to add some new courses that we'll be talking a little bit more with CNI as we develop those courses. So with that being said, we're looking to increase our staff by adding some world language positions, obviously. We have currently one math interventionist. We would need another one for next year. We'll talk more in the future about the two proposed courses that students will be able to take as a unified arts, and then additionally adding some special education positions. We are planning on doing internal postings for the two new course positions, and then obviously for the math interventionist position as well. So we're looking to hopefully be able to take some of our existing staff and move them into some of these new and exciting positions that we're going to be offering our students. So again, thank you for the opportunity to present our new schedule. And at this time, if you have any questions, be happy to entertain them.
Thank you, Mr. Einhorn, and thank you also to Mr. Ross, and I know Mr. Pope put in a lot of work. I know this is the great overview of everything. CNI spent a lot of time going into the details on this, so I appreciate all the work that went into this. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion on this new schedule.
Move that the Board of Education approve the Newtown Middle School schedule for the 2021-2022 school year.
Second.
Okay, so Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, Mr. Cruson seconds the motion. I don't know if either of you want to speak to the motion, or perhaps Mr. Voros, I don't know if you wanted to speak to the motion at this time.
We spent 2 lengthy sessions on the schedule, and there's no question that I personally endorse it. It's very thorough, extremely well thought out, and in the end benefits the children immensely. So that's all I have to say about that. And of course, we're all ready to answer any questions that other board members may have.
Okay, thank you. So are there any questions anybody has at this time? No, I'm sensing none. Oh, I see Ms. Lideline, sorry.
That's okay, I waved. I had a question about the curriculum for the World Language Program, as now it's not being offered 5 days a week. Is that now going to have to be rewritten, and what is the anticipated process for rewriting that curriculum going forward?
That's a great question. So Mrs. Uberti and I have already planned on providing some time and monies for some curriculum writing, because we realize with some of the changes that we're proposing that that's going to need to happen. It also supports the time, additional time for the tech ed and the computer integration and health, because they're all actually adding 8 additional classes. So they're going to get some time to work on curriculum as well in June.
And if I could just add to that, we've also been working with Kim Longabuco and indirectly with the World Language Department at the high school. And largely, we will be taking their curriculum down into the middle school and then making any modifications as necessary. What will ultimately probably be the bigger impact on the language will be at the other end of high school. As those students will be completing, the Spanish, the courses earlier, we may need some courses at the end of, for their junior and senior year, for them to take more electives. But that would actually be a couple years off before we would get to the point where students had processed through Spanish 1 and 2 in the middle school. Similarly, I might add that C-SPAN is modeled off of the Spanish at the high school, the current Spanish that is using Rosetta Stone. And so we are also planning to model and utilize the curriculum that they already have developed and has been approved by the board at the high school at the middle school for that as well. And I think Deb had another question, but I lost her. Oh, there she is. Your square moved.
That's okay. I think you somewhat answered my question about what would happen to the high school curriculum. So I'm sorry, which languages is it going to stay, French and Spanish?
So we're anticipating it staying French and Spanish, but there is another moving part to this, again, that hasn't really impacted the middle school, and that is the students who've had Spanish since kindergarten are currently 5th graders. So that will roll up to 6th grade next year. And then we plan to survey those students probably at this time next year to get a sense of how many of those students will be switching to take French and how many will plan to take Spanish, because that, of course, could impact the future of the World Language Department as well.
Okay, and there's no thought about bringing any other language that is currently offered at the high school down to the middle school?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions or comments? Yes, Mr. D'Elia.
Is the middle school equipped for a culinary program? Do they have a kitchen, a teaching kitchen?
At the middle school?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, we do. We've had that for a number of years. We have a classroom that's set up with, I think it's 4 different ovens and different kitchens, so to speak. And so that's, you know, been a great program. But with that, the teacher in that program retiring at the end of this year, that's a very, very difficult position to replace. And with that being said, we're still trying to provide those kids that are interested in the culinary arts to have that opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, with a cooking club, so that we'll be able to do that. Hopefully, again, in collaboration with the high school program, because I think that would be a great opportunity for the kids that are up there to come back down and give that their experience as well and share that love of cooking.
So this, may I continue?
Yes, Mr. D'Elia.
So I guess I missed that part. So the culinary program is actually being reduced, if I'm not mistaken.
We're sunsetting the
Yes.
Family and Consumer Science program, and that time that was allocated to that, we're increasing the class time for health, tech ed, and computer integration.
Go ahead, Mr. D'Elia.
Can you tell me what tech ed is? Can you just tell me, I'm just curious, what is tech ed?
So that's a class that allows kids a lot of hands-on experience in different areas, from looking at doing different projects. They build model rockets. They do 3D printing. They do a lot of, problem solvings with simple machines. They have a lot of opportunities to really do some hands-on, experiences where kids really enjoy that opportunity of learning some of the basics and really having the chance to demonstrate that with different building programs and whatnot. Over the years, it's changed and we've added some elements to it. And a lot of that has to do with automation and robotics. And a lot more of that kind of stuff is coming through. So as we continue to look at the program moving forward, that's part of our work in June, is to look at that curriculum. Also look at the curriculum of our computer integration class, where they're doing a lot of programming and trying to do a little bit of melding. As the technology changes, we're excited about trying to, again, continuously revamp those programs. And that's also in line with what's happening at Reed and then what's also happening at the high school, so that we're doing that vertical articulation.
Any further questions, Mr. Delia? Yeah.
Maybe this is for Ann or Dr. Rodrigue. Isn't the culinary program at the high school extremely popular? Isn't it?
It is. I mean, just to be clear, family and consumer science has a cooking component. It's not the same as culinary.
Okay.
It's sort of what we used to call home ec,
Home
Mr.
ec,
Delia,
right,
back in
yeah.
the day. I mean, it has evolved. We're not teaching exactly the same thing. And it is extremely difficult to find anyone with that certification currently. And so with the retirement of that person, it is probably appropriate to move on. So we are looking to propose 2 new courses, and that will be brought to the board at a separate time. There is a proposal process that we go through, similar where we bring, the courses to the board, to CNI, and then it would come to you. And as Mr. Einhorn stated, we want to clearly delineate what is happening in the tech ed class by formalizing that curriculum, formalizing the computer integration curriculum, and then looking at the needs and interests of the students in developing 2 new courses for them at the middle school to round out their experience.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it, because I was worried that we were losing culinary experience, and I have to say that firsthand, at the high school, it's made an enormous impact on one of my children, and I know that there are many children that absolutely thrive in that environment. And
Yes.
but I understand exactly when you said it's like home ec. I took home ec, so thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, Michelle, I'd
Mr.
like to clarify something for Dan and others. Dan, I couldn't agree with you more about the culinary experience at the middle school. And so there was a suggestion made that we look into this cooking club, if you will, and bring the culinary students down to the middle school to assist with the cooking club advisor to offer some of this experience for those children, either before school, after school, whenever, because it is, as you well know, a very popular course, very popular. And so it's not something that I personally feel we should, we need to keep our eyes on what can be done to make a program like that available to the children, especially since we have all of the equipment there in those rooms. It's all done. That's number one. And number two, I also want to tell all of you that these courses that are going to be added or modified or whatever are going to come, of course, through CNI because of the curriculum components of them. But Anne has been very good about monitoring all of this with Tom. And another suggestion has been made that possibly the Project Adventure, which was a course unto itself and now is part of the phys ed program, might be able to become its own entity again. But that's something that in the spring everyone is going to be looking at. So, Dan, we've got our radar on high alert for making sure that this wonderful schedule is as wonderful as it can possibly be for these children. And thank you for your input on the food. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? All right, I'm sensing none. So I think Mr. D'Elia.
I just want to thank John for his comments, and but I also want to I just want to offer my support for this motion. I love the fact that we're adding another 15 minutes of instructional time every day, and I think that's critical for learning, and I think it will benefit the children, and I'm in full support of this motion.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak or ask questions before we vote? All right, sensing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. So that motion passes unanimously. Thank you again, Mr. Einhorn and Mr. Ross, for being here to bring this through to us, and give us the high view of it, and knowing all the detail that went into and the work that went into it. I appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you so much to the board for your support.
All right, so that'll bring us to our special education update. And I believe Ms. Peterson is here to, there she is.
Hello.
Hi.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Dr. Rodriguez did ask me to give a brief update on special education in the areas of our action plan from the regarding reading and where we are as a district, and also how we're providing services during this whole COVID time. So in regards to reading and the action plan that we had, we currently now have 10 staff in district that are Wilson certified. I think when we began, we had 4. We've had many of our staff interested in getting certified. So we have 10 certified in Wilson reading. We have 5 trained in Gillingham, and 2 of those 5 have asked to go on to the second level of training for that, which we are supporting. And we have had a few outside reading evaluators that are highly regarded in the state that parents have asked to come and do a consult or a record review to see if services are being provided appropriately, and or to give some advice to the district or some instruction on how to provide those services. And the feedback has been wonderful for the district. Those staff that have been observed by outside reading experts in dyslexia have shared that our staff are providing all the services with fidelity, and they honestly didn't have much to offer in regards to things that we should be doing that we're not doing. So that is really good news for us. We continue to do very comprehensive reading evaluations for our students that we have concerns about potentially having dyslexia. So when parents, when we do share those outside our evaluations with outside providers, they are very comprehensive. So that's great news for us. The outside evaluators don't find much else that they'll need to do. And we're very much in line with what they're thinking as well. So, kudos to our staff. They work very hard, and they absolutely love providing this instruction. So that is our reading. Does anyone have any questions on reading before I move on to how we're providing services now? No, I can't see everyone, so.
I don't see anybody. So.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to how we have been providing special education services during this time of COVID and all the different changes. Beginning with the start of the school year, we had received some guidance from the state that there was a lot of addendums that were provided to school districts. One of them had spoke to those students that required the most support in school systems. And while it could have been taken perceived very differently amongst, you know, anyone. We really looked into that and spoke with our legal counsel on which way to move forward. And we really felt, after assessing how all our students did from March until June, that our students that are in our specialized special education programs in district really struggled the most with accessing any education. Those are students that cannot go onto the computers themselves, that may be nonverbal, that need, you know, that have hygiene needs, one-to-one para support. So we decided in the beginning of the year to bring those students into the buildings every day. While the other students were cohort A or B, those students came every day with a shortened day on Wednesdays. To at least get them into the building and get them back into some routine. We took it a step further, and we looked at students that also had adult support, potentially in general education setting, and were also attached to our specialized programs, but maybe not as integrated into those programs as our 5-day-a-week students, and we brought them in 4 days a week. With the intention of, in the beginning of the year, after K-6 came back full-time, thinking that 7-12 would come back in November, I believe, full-time. When that did not occur, the beginning of November, we met with, myself and the supervisors met with all of the special education teachers. We had asked them to put a list together of students, or we had a conversation about students that they felt potentially were not accessing their education at home, but when they were in school, were really accessing their education. And for those students that were in specialized programs such as Wilson Reading or Orton Gillingham. So we extended that for students to come in 4 days a week, with Wednesdays, of course, at that time, 7-12 being remote and but synchronous live instruction. So we brought all those students in to provide them the opportunity to be in school. When we went remote in November, we continue to offer all our services live. The staff were given the direction in the beginning of the year to make their schedules as though every student was going to be in school. So this way, as parents made the decision to either keep their children home or send them back to school, it was already in their schedule. So going remote really didn't change anything for the special education teachers or any of the service providers, because all the students were accounted for in schedules, and they just ran that schedule as they were all along. What we did do right before Thanksgiving and obviously through the winter break was we offered drop-in services for those students who received speech and language, OT, PT services, for those students that those service providers felt were not accessing it at home. We did have many students that were accessing those services at home live with the provider, and were successful, and they were able to collect data, and they were also able to, meet their goals and objectives as written in the IEP. So we did offer drop-in services. Most parents took the providers up on bringing their children to school for those drop-in services. Some chose not to. So for our preschool, when we began the year, they were in full-time because they really are their own cohort, because they have an AM program and a PM program. So we felt it was safe to bring them all in. Their Monday through Thursday program. So we felt it was safe to bring them in as they typically run. The only time that they were out of the building was, of course, when we went all remote, and they were provided their services as they had been last spring, live synchronous. For our NCP program, which again is our Newtown Community Partnership Program for our 18 to 21-year-olds, we did have them in full starting at the beginning of the year, because the majority of their day is outside of the school building. They are housed at the middle school, but they really have their own wing They don't come in contact with anyone else. They have their own entrance and exit. They have their own vans. So we felt it was safe. They as well are their own cohort. So they worked at the community center. We could not get them out into the community other than the community center because the businesses that we typically have our students at were not ready to take in the students from the school because of COVID and the restrictions. So they have been working at the community center. They did have to quarantine twice on 2 separate occasions. But as with everyone else, they returned yesterday, and they will continue with their, their full-time vocational opportunities. And that is that for COVID. Does anyone have any questions on the services that we've been providing?
I see no questions.
Okay, I'm actually gonna say I'm happy about that. But, and just, I am gonna speak to this a little bit at, obviously more in depth, I should say, at, when I present to the board, but just something to keep in mind that, our special education numbers have gone up dramatically since our October 1 report to the state. I will speak to that. We've had the largest number of new families that have moved into district with students with special needs. So I will review all those numbers at the board meeting. Of course, as I do every year, I give you a graph to show the progression over the last few years. So you will have that ahead of time to be able to look at that.
Good, thank you.
Sure.
So does anybody have any questions, comments? I will ask one question, and it's completely from memory. I think it looked like on the enrollment report that we had an increase this month in our pre-kindergarten group. Is that because we are bringing in more students?
That is pretty typical, because what happens is, although for preschool it tends to be a revolving door of taking children in as they turn 3, there were a lot of evaluations. They seem to go in clusters really, but we did have a big jump after break with students coming in, but those were children that were evaluated either from the beginning of the year or October, November, qualified, and now they've turned 3. So now they join. So it is pretty typical for preschool to start with lower numbers and then to see that jump.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Any other questions before we finish up this agenda item? Nope. All right. Thank you so much for sharing that information. It's good to hear all that's going on in special education, especially the Orton Gillingham and what's going on with our reading and language arts. That's good. All right, so that brings us to appropriately our district assessment report, which I think sort of comes well right after that report. So I think, Mr. Picaro, are you here to give us a rundown on our district assessments?
Yes. Thanks, Dr. Koo. Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. It'd probably be best if I could share my screen. Can I put the presentation up and speak to it as we go through it?
You can't. Have you tried to do it?
I haven't tried yet.
I think you should be able to.
Okay.
There we go.
How's that? Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So thank you, everyone. Tonight I will be presenting the most recent assessment data pertaining to the fall NWEA results, as well as the PSAT and SAT results. I was thinking tonight, this is the first real large-scale data we've had a chance to collect in almost a year, which is unbelievable. So we were really anxious to get this information. Before we start, I just wanted to mention a few points. First, when taking a quick look at the early results, especially from a district-wide perspective, we do have reason to be optimistic, cautiously optimistic, but optimistic, especially in terms of detecting any large widespread learning loss or major gaps in learning across the grade levels, which is encouraging. That being said, we do know that it's important that we look more closely at some of the specific grade levels, classrooms, and even specific skills when analyzing the data further. In many ways, this is a starting point as we continue to dig deeper, but certainly an encouraging starting point to begin with. So I'm anxious to take you through it. In terms of the NWEA reports, we're going to take a look at the data 3 different ways. First, we'll compare RIT mean scores from the fall 2019 test with this most recent fall administration. Second, we'll look at projected proficiency results on state assessments from last year to this year. And lastly, we'll take a look at what the data tells us regarding student growth for matched cohorts of students from 2019 to 2020. And with all of these results, we'll take a look at both math and reading scores. Our NWEA testing window opened November 2nd and it ran through December 10th. We tested all students in grades 2 through 8 in both reading and math. I think it's important to mention that under optimal conditions, we would want the testing environment to be as consistent as possible in each grade level and in each school. As with everything else this past year, we needed to be as flexible as possible with the conditions and the way the testing was administered. So during our testing window, students did begin the testing being all in the all-in environment in grades K through 6 and the hybrid environment in grades 7 and 8. But by the tail end of the testing window, all those students were in a fully remote environment. So we initially had estimated that somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 20% of our students experienced testing in a remote environment. Most recent data today from NWEA indicates that it's probably a little bit less than 10% of our students that did experience some form of remote testing during that window. I mention that because it's pretty non-traditional. Again, you want to be as consistent as possible, but we're trying to be as flexible as we can under the circumstances. It is somewhat non-traditional to have that testing done remotely. It does require kind of this 3-way communication between the parents at home, our in-school test proctors, and a student. And we try our best to recreate an in-school test learning environment. And just want to make sure I mention that to you as well. Let's take a look at the data. We'll start with grade on grade mean RIT comparisons. NWEA uses a scale score known as RIT to measure student achievement. The RIT scores range from 100 to 300. RIT scores give us an idea of each student's instructional level, but it also gives us a method to measure student growth from year to year. So the first report we're looking at is the fall math mean RIT scores from 2019 compared to the most recent administration of the NWEA this year. Again, this is in math. And you'll see that there are some slight decreases when comparing third grade test this year, 5th grade test, and 8th grade tests to last year's results, but they are nominal decreases. Another way to look at the data for those of you that prefer a different format is the bar graph. The blue bars represent our fall testing last year. The red bars represent testing this year. I like to try to present this a few different ways for those of you that prefer a different format. And you can see here that grade 5, 8 probably have the largest variances, although small when considering the differential. And if we look at reading comparisons of mean writ from fall of last year to fall of this year, we see slight increases at every grade level. So we were happy to see that reading across the board was up this year when we compared grade on grade mean writ scores. And again, in the bar graph. Another way to look at the data is to look at the percentage of students projected to score proficient or better on state assessments. And NWEA makes those projections for us. If we take a look at math projections from last year's fall assessment, 61.3% of the students were projected to be in level 3 and 4 on smarter balanced assessments. If we looked at our assessment this year, fall 2020, 62.8% of our students are projected to be in that level 3 and 4 range. Slightly lower at 62.8, but really not a major decrease, not a huge statistical difference when looking at it. In reading, similar to the mean writ comparisons, our fall 2019 reading projections for students who would be scoring in the level 3 to 4 range on state assessment, it was 67.7. Our fall 2020 reading projections this year were 75.9% of students scoring in the level 3 and 4 range. So we were happy to see an increase in that of 8.2%. Again, an encouraging number to look at. Final way that I wanted to present the information to the board was through student growth. These are reports that show matched cohort comparisons, same students taking the test, but the next grade level. So you get to a comparison of students, same students from grade to grade. NWEA provides districts with an expected writ growth for each grade level. So by running these reports, we're able to see whether students' actual growth on the NWEA assessment from year to year was higher or lower than those expectations set by NWEA. This is the math analysis, student growth from grade level to grade level. As you can see in math, most students either met or were very close to meeting their expected growth figures, with the exception of students moving from grade 2 to grade 3. We do see a differential of 6.5 points. We're exploring reasons for that. There are some fairly significant jumps in skills and concepts for students from grades 2 to 3 in math. These include things like the introduction of multiplication and division strategies within the 100 block, the development of deeper understanding of fractions. And when thinking about the remote environment, those are tricky concepts and skills, more abstract to teach in a remote or hybrid environment. And that may have an impact, on that particular grade level's growth. Again, this could be presented in a different way. If you look at the triangles on this graph, those represent the expected growth numbers given to us by NWEA, and the blue bars represent the actual growth from grade to grade for that matched cohort. We can also take a look at reading. So this is their matched cohort student growth from last year to this year. And, you can see most, if not all, grade level growth expectations were met when looking at the reading chart, with a nominal decrease for students going from grade 6 to grade 7. And again, in the bar graph, as you can see, most of the blue bars, the actual growth met or exceeded those expectations set by NWEA. So taking a look at the data in a variety of ways, what's the analysis and what are some of our next steps? Student math performance and on all three of those presentations were lower than reading, when you're comparing grade on grade or growth results. I sat in on an NWEA conference last week, and nationally NWEA math results are lower than reading. There's a lot of speculation why that is the case. In summary, I think a lot of the reasons that have been brought up have to do with teaching math remotely is more difficult, seems to be more difficult than teaching reading. There's a lot more abstract concepts and skills that need to be taught to kids. That was one of the reasons that the group settled on. And a second point that came up was that reading in general traditionally does have more home support. I mean, reading between students and parents does start at a young age. And that's something that's could be more easily supported at home. So those were two key points that came up in that NWEA conference that I wanted to share when discussing why math results were lower nationally, and that those could be potential reasons why they're lower here as well in the district. In terms of next steps, I mean, we continually are working with our math and reading specialists to try to get their view from on the ground, as well as meetings with classroom teachers to identify those specific skills that we really do need to address for kids. We're providing additional Tier 2 support whenever we can for students. And, the group that seems to be struggling the most, especially in the upper grades, are the full-time distance learners. So we're closely monitoring and supporting as best we can the full-time distance learners. We do also have a cohort of students in grades K through 5 who are piloting new math resources. So we're monitoring that group. We haven't had a chance to do this because a lot of the data that I'm presenting to you now was fresh in right before the break, and I wanted to give you at least a district-wide analysis for tonight. But we're going to take a closer look at the students who are piloting those new math resources and disaggregate the data so that we can see how one resource may be impacting students versus another. We'll be doing that analysis shortly. The next few slides deal directly with PSAT and SAT. I just want to say a few general points about the administration of both of these tests. Students in the 11th grade, all students in 11th grade take the PSAT in October each year. Those same 11th grade students then take the SAT in March as well. I would say that in 2020, this last spring, the March SAT was postponed. So instead of taking that SAT in the spring, our 12th graders took that SAT October of this year. So when you see the data presented, I'll make sure that I mention that as well. But that would be the one data point that's different than has been done traditionally. You'll also notice in the data that I'm going to show you that there is no SAT for this year because it hasn't been administered yet. So you'll see PSAT scores for 2020, but not the SAT results as that hasn't been done yet. So what we're looking at is our ELA scores, SAT, percentage of students scoring in the level 3 and 4 range. I wanted to give you a sense in the first column of, how traditionally, how have our students done? So that's the 2018-19 results, the first 2 bars. The blue represents the 11th graders PSAT scores. while the red represent that same group's SAT scores on the ELA portion of the test. We then, in the middle, you can see the fall PSAT from last year, and it's that second bar, the 85% of students in the level 3 and 4 on the reading test. That test was administered to those students as 12th graders in October. And then that final bar, blue bar, that's 82%. That is our current 11th graders who just took the PSAT this October. This next slide shows the math scores for PSAT and SAT. And again, it starts with the 2018-19 results, PSAT to SAT, that same group. And again, the red in that middle, the 65% in the level 3 and 4, that's the group of 12th graders that took the SAT this October. And then the final bar that you see, the blue bar, at 57%, that's our current 11th graders who recently took that PSAT, the math PSAT. There is a decrease, obviously, in that final score to 57%. Speaking with Kim Longabuco, we were talking, she had been discussing this with her math department. One potential explanation for the decrease in this 11th grader score is that is the group of sophomores last year in the spring who had the interruption to distance learning while they were in the middle of their Algebra 2 class. Large portion of the questions that are covered on that PSAT for them this year are from the Algebra 2 curriculum. So there could be some impact on that interruption last spring for that particular group. So it would be reasonable to believe that could have had an impact on that group, and you could see a decrease for that reason. One final piece of information, not related directly to the assessments, that I wanted to share with the board is the most recent class grade report for students in grades 5 through 12. This compares the number of students with 1 or more failing grades from the first marking period of last year to the first marking period this year. And you can see that there is an increase, and that increase does get larger as we go up in grade level. Quite frankly, overall, as we do go up in grade level, for some students, the engagement online, there's a large portion of those students with the failing grades are students that are disengaged, and that disengagement does seem to increase with grade level. I would also say that even though students have done well on the large scale assessments that you saw, students are struggling in the hybrid and remote environments with day-to-day assessments and assignments. And that shows in the failing grade report. Although it does look like the high school is significantly higher, I think it's worth mentioning that students in high school are taking 7 or 8 classes. So if a student is disengaged, they're more than likely failing more than one of those classes, whereas the cluster model at the middle school and Reed may have a different impact on those same students. So it may look worse, but keep in mind that those students are taking more courses. I think I've mentioned some of that here for you. I think bullet 3 here too, I just want to point out that, I mean, the on-screen learning, I think we can all agree that in-person learning is the best for students, and the on-screen learning mindset does significantly differ from in-person learning. And it was also important for me to get you some anecdotal feedback from our staff on the ground. Before the break, I had a chance to exchange emails with the K-6 math and reading specialists, and I just wanted to share some of that communication with you. We're frequently talking about what they're seeing in terms of students struggling and the successes they're seeing. I asked him to share some of that information with me because I did want to share it with the board. Obviously, again, I think everybody can agree that students are performing much better when in person. Distance learning does hinder academic growth and progress, according to the group. The math specialist did point out that students are struggling on typical math and topic unit assessments this year. There is a lack of conceptual understanding in some areas, as well as some inconsistencies with attention and focus when in hybrid or fully remote. And similarly from the K-6 specialists, I did want to mention that they are seeing some drop in reading fluency scores, and that DIBELS and DRA scores are lower than what a student may have scored on the NWEA. And some of the reasons for that is fluency is not assessed on the NWEA. I didn't get this in writing from them, but they did share with me that writing scores overall, students are struggling in writing, and that is not something that's assessed on the NWEA as well. And again, in bold, students perform significantly better when all in. And that was emphasized by both groups. I did want to share this last quote with you. This came in from one of the teachers prior to the end of the break. And I just thought it was worth sharing. And I'll read it to you. Despite the uphill battle that has been teaching and learning since last March, the children are making progress. I applaud them, their teachers, their parents, and the district for all the creative and out-of-the-box efforts it's taken to make instruction possible this year. It is a testament to the resiliency of this town. And I just thought they were good words and they were worth sharing with the board. So that is the end of the data presentation. People have questions I can't see, but I'm gonna escape from here.
Yeah, once we get everybody back in our panel, we can see who's got questions. Thank you for that overview. That's, I know we've all been really anticipating what might be going on with our students. So it's good to actually have some data to look at. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, Michelle,
Yes, Mr. Boros.
Frank, here's my question.
Yes.
What is the plan to present this information to the parents? That's number one. And number two is, when it's presented to the parents, in my personal opinion, I think we have to find a way that it individualizes it so much that they really understand what the assessment is saying about their child. Especially now, because there's so many of them that feel, well, I shouldn't say so many of them. There are parents that feel that their children are lagging behind. And so therefore, number three question is, what will be said to them to help them understand what we're going to do to make sure that these gaps are filled, if you will? A lot of questions, sorry.
3 questions. You got all those?
I'll do my best. I think the first thing I would say, Mr. Veros, is I think what we've learned is that the students are doing well on these large scale assessments, meaning they have the capabilities, obviously, and it's shown in the scores. We're not seeing those huge gaps, and we were looking forward to getting that information because really no one knew, and that getting this fall assessment underway was very helpful to show us that there wasn't a ton of loss. I think what we do know is that there may be specific skills at specific levels, more acute, that where students are struggling. And so that analysis at a more granular level is the next step in this process. And that's going to take place at the buildings, at the classroom level. Ann and I have talked about having those discussions, and obviously the specialists are looking at them, but those scores need to take place, need to be looked at in a much more specific way at the building level, so that we can see what discrete skills maybe certain students are struggling with, even though they're scoring well overall.
And I can jump in, John, as far as the parents, we always do send out the results. NWA does have a very nice parent report. So most of our parents are accustomed to getting the results. It usually goes with a letter that's fairly similar from year to year. However, I am in the process of crafting a letter really to address this year, because you're right, it's unique. I think some parents may wonder why their students performed well and may not have good grades, if you will, and there may be the opposite. There may be some students who are completing work assignments but maybe didn't score so well. So we'll try to explain that in the letter, and as always, they would be able to reach back out to their child's teacher to look at that in depth, because it is unique to each student. The real work for us is exactly what Frank said, is really going to be working with the teachers to help them understand the data, and why it may feel like in the classroom students may not be performing as well, and yet on an assessment it shows that they do have some skills. So how do we pick out, just like Frank said, what they don't know and what they do know, and backfill that?
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? Yes, Ms. Zukowski?
I'd like to get from the individual back to the aggregate. Throughout, there were comments about this has probably been caused or significantly influenced by the disruption caused by COVID. Will we be able to review how our results that were impacted by the COVID distance learning compare to like schools, at some point in this coming year?
Well, we will when we do, assuming that the state does have the assessment in the spring, then we would have a district to district comparison. I'm not sure we'll be able to get that from NWEA in terms of how other schools are scoring on this particular assessment, but we would be able to do that with the statewide ones in the spring, assuming they do take place. And we are right now under the impression that they will be taking place.
Okay, thank you.
Just a follow-up with that. Could we do that with the PSATs and SATs?
It's not, it hasn't been presented that way from the state, because not all school districts ended up administering it. It typically is, that does usually come from the state, but they did not release that information because not every school district was able to give it at all.
Okay. Mr. Delia, did you have a question? Does anybody else have a question? Okay, Mr. Delia.
Sorry, I was writing notes because you guys, you and Mrs. Zukowski asked a couple of questions that I was wondering about as far as comparing to our scores to others in our DERG. I do have a question about the high school fail rate, and I'm wondering how many of those students are remote learners? Do you have that data? And then a follow-up to that is, what is being done for intervention with remote students who are failing?
I don't have the data on how many of them are remote students, Mr. Delia, but I do know that a large portion of that group, just having spoken to the high school, are remote learners who are disengaged that they just can't get a hold of. I spoke to Dr. Longabuco today about just the process that they go through to try to reach students. They're doing everything they can to try to reach those students that are disengaged. You know, it starts with the teacher contact first, then counselors are reaching out, then the administrators are reaching out. I mean, they're trying at all levels to reach out to those students that have been disengaged in the remote learning phase. Unfortunately, some of those same students are our struggling learners. So they really do want to get a hold of them. And those are the students that do need, more support. And the high school is aware of it. And the high school, again, is doing everything they can to try to re-engage those students. You know, some of those students in an in-person environment would be struggling learners, but opportunities to re-engage them would be more readily available. You can go to the classroom, you can pull them out, you can bring them into counseling, but not having them in the building and not having them that accessible adds another layer of difficulty to that process. But they're, I know they're doing everything they can to try to meet that challenge.
And you're nodding. Do you want to jump in, Ann, or is it? I have a follow up if you don't. Oh,
No,
okay. Sorry. I thought you were.
I'm in agreement. They're doing everything they can possibly do. I mean, in some cases, parents are involved, and parents can't get their children to do the work. So it's really a function of, if the kids are not in the building, you can't put your hands on them. It's very challenging for them.
May I follow up?
Yes, Mr. D'Elia.
Frank, call me Dan, by the way. Don't call me Mr. D'Elia. Thanks. Frank, so I guess I'm understanding is that really there's probably a direct correlation between students who are not engaged in learning remotely and the fail rates. Is that a fair assumption in your opinion?
Yes. Yes, I think that's a fair assumption. And I think that you see that increase as we go higher in grade level.
So may I continue?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I guess this maybe goes to Deb Peterson, and I'm glad she's still here, or somebody. What do we do with kids that are not? And maybe Deb, I didn't mean to bring you into this, but what do we do with kids who aren't showing up for school?
Well,
how do we help them? How do we get those kids that aren't showing up for school? Isn't that the same as skipping school?
Well, so
maybe that's not you. I didn't mean to drag.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's okay. I can only speak obviously for the special education department. I speak with Dr. Grayson all the time, who's the supervisor up there. And they too have been reaching out and trying to provide the education as best they can. Trying to get creative with ideas. Dr. Rodriguez had mentioned that we added a special education teacher at the high school this year. And that really was because of our struggling learners where our teachers couldn't see them every day. They were struggling at home getting work done. So we added this teacher to help facilitate that so that the case managers could work on their goals and objectives to meet compliance with that, but then also have someone there to be able to meet with them on their classwork, homework, things such as that. We've also reached out to some outside agencies for those students that, as Frank mentioned, just are not showing up to school and the parents can't even get them to engage. We have partnered with some outside agencies and programs where they will go into the home to work with the students, even during this time of COVID. So, we're just trying to reach out and provide resources as best we can to support the learner and, try to re-engage them. So, as
we're
Frank
also,
said,
just to piggyback off what Deb is saying, we are having conversations back in November, end of October. I worked with the principals on collecting data on non-special education students who were presenting as disengaged, but were engaged when they were in school in the hybrid, with the possibility of expanding the opportunity for those students to come in. So in other words, if when they're in school, it's working for them, then we could, and we can identify that through the data we've collected, then we could have the opportunity to bring them in 4 days if we were to remain on hybrid. Now, we're hoping we come back on the 19th, but we don't know. So we are trying to identify who those students are and if that would make a difference for them. And that could be something that we offer. And that's not just at the high school, that's at all of the schools. Similar with our English language learners, that population has also, they're often not identified as special education. Most of the time they're not, but it is also difficult to engage with them for obvious reasons. So that's another strategy. And other creative strategies, as Deb mentioned, really just trying to think out of the box and ways to get the kids to finish.
And just, Dan, just to, wrap up our part of the conversation, I do think it's important to share that our staff, as Frank said, it really stresses them out when their students are not engaged. They're not sitting back saying, oh yeah, okay, great, one less student to have to worry about. They are really stressed out. We've actually, I have a lot of conversations with the staff about kind of taking a step back and looking at all the strategies that we've tried and what else we can try that potentially we've overlooked. But it really bothers the teachers when their students are not engaged, just as much as it bothers us. So I do think it's important to say that that just adds to the teachers' stress, given the environment that they're in now.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it a lot, actually. This has been a very enlightening conversation for me, and I'm also living it as well as a teacher. So, and I want to applaud Dr. Rodrigue and the team for making the decision to bring the kids back. I think that this data supports that from a learning point of view and from an engagement point of view. And I just, I applaud you for making that difficult decision. I think it's best for the kids. And I applaud the teachers for trying everything they possibly can. And I also sympathize with the stresses that they're feeling. I really do. So thank you. I don't think I have any more questions at this point.
All right, does anybody else have questions?
No.
Mr. Boros, are you?
Yeah, I don't know if it's so much a question as what is going, well, it is a question. What is going to happen if we have children in the high school in particular who are not doing well, who are failing, and at the end of the year, they failed X number of courses, which means they don't have credits to graduate. Is there a plan, for example, to bring them in, assuming we can, in the summer and work with them so that all of their failures turn into passes, if you will? Because if it's the case where we have a disproportionate number of children not graduating because they failed, then we have to anticipate that in the summer is when they would have to be required to meet somewhere so that we can teach them or whatever.
A couple of things about that. First is that in actually looking at the raw data, I can tell you that the upperclassmen are faring better than the lowerclassmen. There are less failures in the senior class than any of the classes. And that would make sense if you think about it. They have more at stake, they're more mature, they understand, they're more adult, and they can probably adapt to this challenging world that we all, that's challenging for everyone. So that's one piece of it. Secondly, for seniors who are in danger of failing, they actually are holding in danger of failure meetings with the parents. It's very serious. They meet with the parents, they lay it out for the students. they work to create specific plans, whatever it takes, basically, to try to get that student engaged in doing the work so that they do graduate. And that has been successful. Frank and I have sat in on a number of team meetings at the high school and heard some success stories about how it did make a difference with some students who then realized, okay, I need to start doing the work. And lastly, we did that last summer, and that is certainly something that we would look at again next summer. We did provide tutoring opportunities for students who had not completed work. They were given incompletes, and they were assigned actually in-person tutors. And they had the opportunity to either meet with that person in person or online, whatever would work better. And that person was really a coach to get them to do the work, because a lot of times this is not about not understanding the work, it's about not doing the work. So they just needed somebody to kind of coach them along. So we were able to turn a lot of those incompletes and failures from last year into passing grades. They had, I believe, to like the second or third week of September in order to complete the work, and many of them did. So we would, we'll have to see where we are as we get to nearer to the end of the year, but that would certainly be something we would consider doing again to support kids. I think Lori wants to say something too.
Thank you.
No, you said it earlier, but what I was just going to say is, this is pretty typical. If we just put COVID aside, what you just outlined, Dan, is what we would do at the high school anyway. So we work, I know that they work so hard, John, when there are seniors who are failing. I can't even tell you, countless meetings. They make it it's their goal to try to get every student to graduate. So, from family meetings. The other piece I wanted to point out is, as much as this is looking as an academic issue, it's a social emotional one. And it's been exacerbated because of the conditions under which students are finding themselves. So those students who easily are isolated to begin with are even more isolated. One of the things that I think I pointed out that Peak was doing for the lower, just starting at the lower levels, trying to come up with ways to reach out to kids on the side outside of the day, right? So you just want to talk, you want you want to meet up with other students because you don't really maybe have you haven't seen friends, you might have less friends. They want to make sure they're making connections. We've started at the lower levels, but at the upper levels, there are lots of students who need support in ways that go beyond just, did we do the work? And I think that's what we're seeing across the board. And I know that the high school is doing everything they can and coming up with other creative ways to reach out to kids in that area. So, and you're right, Dan, it happens. It's happening across the board at every school. I did want to also touch base with something, come back to what you questioned, Deb, which was where, if we can look at the scores across the board. We meet weekly. I can only speak for the Western Connecticut area superintendents. And a lot of the surprises that you heard tonight, reading being not as bad as we thought it would be, math, they're finding another district. So I think we're seeing across the board that it wasn't a slide as many people thought in such a horrific manner. So there's certainly skills and areas we have to work on, but I think that was definitely seen in other districts because it was talked about at one of our meetings. People were comparing scores. So, and very similar. I mean, when I saw Dr. Piccaro's presentation, it was very similar to our discussion in those very areas as well. Reading being one that was surprising.
All right, before we wrap this up, are there any other questions, comments? Yeah, Mr. D'Elia.
I know that I said I was done before, but I'm back. Is there this isn't, I'm being as, this is a two-parter. Is there anything our board can do now to help you engage the students that aren't engaged? And then there's going to have to be planning beyond this school year because there's going to be a huge gap. And are you bringing that into consideration with the upcoming budget and whatnot? So that's a two-parter, but is there anything we can do now to support you more than you're already, is there anything we can do?
And Frank, I think everything we're doing right now, we're doing internally and we have the staffing. We've asked how many times, I think we've asked at administrators meetings, what is it you need? Early on, they didn't know. And I think you heard that at one of the early board meetings. This really spoke to and addressed the actual assessments and where the students are, which helps a lot. But a lot of we kind of anticipated this, obviously, that there would be a slide somewhere, there would be skills that we needed to make sure we filled those gaps in and have, I believe, appropriately asked for what we need in the next budget. Do you agree, Ann and Frank?
Yes, and I would also add to that I don't know that we could say, sitting here in January, how horrific it will be in June, because the point that Lori made is spot on about the emotionality and the connection and the enthusiasm for learning. And I think, based on my previous experience in the district, I think what we're going to find is as kids return to school in a normal learning environment, your typical on grade level students are going to rebound very quickly. And your students who were struggling learners before are going to have a longer haul to get back to where they need to be. And that will take time. So I'm actually pretty optimistic, that kids are going to be back in school, hopefully. We're not going to end where we ended last year. And, even though we have a high number of distance learners right now, as Lori reported, a lot of parents have stated that they're going to be distance learners for the next couple weeks. And, we're hoping that then we'll see a decrease. And what we saw prior when the numbers were going down was that as students returned, it was building confidence and other kids wanted to come back and more kids were coming back. We had many classes who had no distance learners. So, I think we have to remain flexible to the situation and hopefully optimistic. I'm a hope for the best, prepare for the worst. So I think we are prepared to do what we have to do if there are large numbers of students who are struggling. But I'm also pretty hopeful that with our teachers who are phenomenal and are doing an amazing job, that once they get those kids in front of them, I think we're going to see some acceleration in their learning as well, at least for the majority, not every child, but the majority.
And I think we've been building in those support personnel, those positions. I mean, when what Deb brought up with the flex, what we brought to the middle school, our behavioral interventionists, we've been slowly building this in as we go, despite COVID, prior to COVID. So we ended up in a really good place, I think, during COVID, and hopefully following this is really to our advantage.
That's true. We have a lot of resources that other districts don't have. And the number one resource we have is really good people and in a lot of key positions. So I think that's absolutely true.
And class sizes that are not overwhelming. That I just having that conversation in all the districts just yesterday, that's telling too. That's helped a lot, especially at the kindergarten, starting at the kindergarten level.
Okay, Ms. Dukowski?
Yeah. So going to the more specific, in that you said there were two clear areas where distance learning has shown up on your assessment. One being the 2nd to 3rd grade math, and one being the the stat score because of the impact on Algebra 2 for the sophomores. Now, with the third graders not getting the concepts of fractions, not getting the concepts of, division and needed for division and multiplication, my guess is that you've got math interventionists working directly with them, because if the kids, miss some of the concepts, my concern is that when they go to the next grade, they'll say, oh, I'm just too stupid, when in fact, it's not at all the case. It's just that they missed the concepts. But with the Algebra 2 kids, is that going to impact their willingness or their confidence to take more math courses? And if so, what are we going to be doing about that?
So a couple of things. You're correct in the first part of that with our elementary students, that the math specialists are working with those students. And honestly, this data is relatively new, so we're going to be even more targeted with students in terms of, now that we have this, and that they can use this data to look directly in classrooms and at particular students in terms of who needs Tier 2 support. And they've started that process already, and they'll continue with that process with that second to third grade cohort. I did speak to Kim Longabuco today about that same question, Deb, regarding Algebra 2. If we're thinking that's where the impact was, and that decrease in the PSAT score, that math department, as with all the teachers in this district, I mean, they're extremely dedicated, and that's a group that understands the data and has been working to integrate Algebra 2 skills and concepts into the geometry classes where they see opportunities for that to take place. I also know that group specifically is addressing SAT math problems on a daily basis with that same cohort of kids to make sure that they're prepared for that SAT test in the spring, because they did see that dip in scores on the PSAT. So that's a group that, I know just from the conversation today, is doing their best to integrate those Algebra 2 concepts into their geometry class, as well as working on SAT questions directly with kids to start classes daily. So they're doing that preparation work for kids daily to make sure they feel confident about that assessment when they get it again in the springtime.
All right, any other questions or comments? So I'd like to wrap this up, but this is all really good information, and clearly we needed to have this discussion and see it all. I just want to point out that the middle part of the question about what we can do in next year's budget, part of it is, the presentation we just saw about the middle school, and how that all is, a lot of it is providing more math specialists, more support to the students. There's more SPED support in that schedule. So I think that's one piece. The other thing that I just wanted to comment on was that I think that the data that you presented could be a normal year. I think we all expected a COVID year, and the variations that you see, dips and then pluses in other areas are something that we would kind of expect in most years. But I was particularly struck by the fact that I think there's an assumption that the older students are better equipped to handle distance learning. I've heard it over and over again since last summer. And I think this data maybe tells a little bit of a different story, and that we definitely do need to pay attention to the older students, the middle school, the high school, and having them be in person as much as we can possibly do that. So those are comments. No need to answer anything. Those weren't questions. So I'm just giving my 2 cents. So thank you so much for the presentation, I think we really needed that. I don't know if, I know Mr. Cruson, you didn't have any input and I don't want to cut you off before. Okay. So thank you so much. And we'll take that all in and look forward to the next time we can see data.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Have a good night.
Okay, you too.
All right, so that brings us to action on minutes of December 15th, and I'll entertain a motion on that.
I move that the Board of Education approve the minutes of December 15, 2020.
All right, so Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, and Mr. Voros, were you seconding?
Yes, I'll second.
Okay. And were there any comments or changes on that? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Any abstentions? One abstention, Mr. Cruson. So that passes with just one abstention. All right, so that brings us to our discussion and possible action on charter revision considerations. And we have shared a packet with you, and I appreciate the work that Ms. Dukowski put into these. And so we met, Ms. Dukowski and I met twice to, yes, Mr. D'Elia?
You want me to make a motion? We had a motion.
No, so I think, I mean, this is a large packet of items. I think that
Good, we're good. Thank you.
it might be useful to just for us to present it and then decide whether we want to take action on it this evening or not, I think. Thank you. Okay, so so we met a couple times last week. And so I think what we'll do is maybe just go through these very briefly and see if anybody has any changes they want to make to what's been presented, and see if you're willing to take action on this evening, or whether you want to wait until next meeting. And that would be the January, what are we, 19th is our next meeting. So I'll just go through page by page, very brief. I'll do a few, Ms. Dukowski will do a few, and then you can interrupt us at the time and let me know if you want to discuss something. We'll see how quickly we can get through this. Is that okay? All right, so page 1, we have Board of Education elections. This is not very different from what we proposed several years ago. The recommendation was that the Newtown Ordinance 124 should be merged into the charter, specifically calling out a statute 9-204B of the Connecticut General Statutes. That's because when the last charter revision was filed with the state, the election process for the Board of Education was unintentionally indicated as following a different statute. And the Legislative Council then passed an ordinance that now references the correct statute. So we're just asking that the charter be updated to indicate that. Any questions on that before we move on? All right, so the date for referendum, again, was something that we recommended previously. And the recommendation is that they review voting information to understand whether moving the referendum date or expanding accessibility via absentee or mail-in ballot might increase voter turnout. And this is just a question of how to increase voter turnout. The question has come up because of the date of the referendum in the past, because it's shortly after our spring vacation in the schools, and it means it's difficult to get people motivated to go out and vote. So that was that one. Page 2 is special appropriations, and I'll let Ms. Dukowski describe that one.
Okay, so in the charter, the special appropriations section specifically says and highly implies that the only people who can initiate a special appropriations are the first selectman with the approval of the Board of Selectmen and the Legislative Council. We have now special appropriations are sort of like the gap fillers, you might say. So we have a budget appropriation, we have a CIP based appropriations. Those are the bulk of the budgets. And in both cases, basically what happens is the Board of Ed acts as a peer to the Board of Selectmen, in that both the Board of Ed initiates its own budget, the Board of Ed initiates its own CIP. And so yet we have this third type of appropriation where the Board of Ed does not have any agency in terms of initiating. So the question is, why would there be a difference between the two of the appropriations? The Board of Ed has agency to initiate, but the third one, the Board of Ed does not. And so we're asking for that to be reviewed. Any comments? Any concerns? Okay, because we will work them in if just to let you know, if there's anything that concerns you, please do let us know. Now, in terms of the non-lapsing account, so this is in here primarily because there has been an action between the Board of Finance and the Legislative Council that basically generated a letter from the town council saying that from his point of view, that putting money into the non-lapsing account is, quote, let me find it, is, quote, similar to a special appropriations. Okay, so now that means if it's an appropriation, there is a possibility that the Charter Revision Commission may turn and say, well, if it's an appropriation, it needs to be in the charter. So what this is recommending is essentially to, we have another model of doing financial appropriations, in that there's a financial regulation for the CIP policy. And so what this is basically saying is we think that, anything that would be about the process related to the non-lapsing account should not be hard-coded in the charter, but rather should be taken forward with a financial regulation consistent, in a manner. I don't want to say it's consistent with the CIP, but the CIP is a financial process. This would be a financial process, and they should be treated the same way, not one in the charter and one not in the charter. Okay, moving on. Appropriation versus appropriating fiscal authority. There's a confusion from the Board of Ed in terms of who is the proper fiscal authority. If you look at the state statutes that talk about the Board of Ed, there is language that is used across many different statutes, state general statutes, that basically say some fairly close wording along the lines of the Board of Finance in each town having a Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen in each town having no Board of Finance, and otherwise to the authority making appropriations. So there's a lot that we do that we have to figure out who the fiscal authority is that we're supposed to work with. So that is, for example, the fiscal authority used in determining key dates in contract negotiations. So that language is there. So who is the fiscal authority that would then set the dates relevant to our contract negotiations? And it's also in terms of the fiscal authority is supposed to participate or be included in our contract negotiations. So we should know, more specifically which is actually the fiscal authority. And of course, it was all brought out because of the non-lapsing, saying the fiscal authority, we thought it was the Board of Finance. the legislative council is coming back and saying, no, 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 it is actually the legislative council. And, you know, we want to be able to make sure that we are adhere to the regulations, and we want to be able to make sure we adhere to the charter. But right now we're sort of in this limbo. It's not clear. Comments? Okay, practices related to appropriating fiscal authority. Since there became the Board of Finance was once a subcommittee of the Legislative Council. But since there's been a Board of Finance, we find that especially with the budget appropriation, the budget work we do, that we present to the Board of Finance, we then support our reasons for the budget to the Board of Finance. And then they, ideally, they basically go to send the budget to the Legislative Council, and then they are the people or the board that's supposed to then support their recommended budget. In reality, what happens is we end up going through the education subcommittee of the Legislative Council, again, essentially reiterating the process that we just did with the Board of Finance, which takes people hour, it takes, evenings, it's a question of, is that duplication necessary? And so that's the point of having this particular addition to our requests. Okay, I just check. The next one is, if you look at the regulation of how regulations are actually created, there is a discussion in terms of the creation of financial regulations. And that basically says that these financial regulations would be referred to the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Director prior to action. And clearly there are financial regulations that inherently influence the Board of Education, for example, the CIP, which they did forward it to us, and eventually possibly the non-lapsing account. And so the question again is, why is the Board of Ed missing? Because again, the Board of Ed is a peer in these processes to the Board of Selectmen. Next.
All right, I'll take the next. Town departments versus departments of the town. So I'm not sure the charter has ever really been reviewed in great detail for this, but there does seem to be some confusion or room for confusion with the use of town department. So there is a section in which the Board of Education is given as an example of a town department, meaning we are a recipient of funds from the general fund. But the term town department really, I think, it doesn't always refer to the Board of Education. So the recommendation is to replace the term town department with an appropriation assignee or a new town agency or some other term that clearly focuses on the assignment, what the meaning of the term is. It's an assignment, a body that will receive funds. And then review the sections that currently reference town department to determine whether the language accurately applies to the Board of Education and the current practices. So we essentially listed all of the sections where town department is used, and sometimes it includes Board of Education, or it could, and sometimes it doesn't, but just the request is that they review that. The next section is the finance director. So the town charter defines what the finance director shall do, and it includes preparing a cost analysis of all labor contracts and assisting in labor negotiations, but that only applies to municipal negotiations. And so the Board of Education does our own negotiations. We prepare cost analyses of our own contracts. So I think we're just asking that the charter be clear that that's what this process refers to. Yeah, Mr. Dalia.
Does the charter specifically say Board of Education Finance Director or just Finance Director in general?
No, it's the finance director for the town. So that section specifically defines the role that the finance director for the town, what their role is.
Right.
There is nothing regarding, say the Board of Education business director does not appear in there.
Oh, I understand. Okay, I'm sorry. And I get it. Thank you.
Does that?
Yeah, I understand now. Thank
Okay.
you. I just was curious if this is somehow going to impact Tanya, and this is a separate thing.
No, it's specifically for the municipal
I understand.
finance director.
Thank you.
Okay. The next section is budget process. It's a section that's unclear what it actually means, and the request is just to clarify what the meaning of that section, what it is. The next page, the town clerk and meeting conduct. Just the recommendation is to review whether it's necessary for the Board of Education to file bylaws with the town clerk, because that's what this section indicates should be happening. Since we already filed the bylaws in the central office, they're available online. So that's that request. Ex officio membership on the Board of Education. This section indicates that the first selectman shall be an ex officio member of all town bodies, which would include the Board of Education. The request is to review whether the Board of Education should be excluded from this section, that the first selectman be an ex officio member. It seems inconsistent with the town government structure, in which the Board of Selectmen has a role that's parallel to the Board of Education, and the superintendent has a role that's parallel to that of the first selectman. Additionally, I could see where this might lead to legal issues, though we're not bringing that up here, but and then page 11.
Okay. So voting at meetings, the charter basically says you have to say yes or no. But I mean, even in the case where we have our meetings and somebody's not here with the minutes, they will abstain because of course they were not part of the conversation. So technically speaking, we're not, if we were to go with the charter, we're violating the charter when we actually abstain from approving or not approving the minutes for meetings for which we were not present. So the question is to review whether, it's always a yes or no, or whether they should soften that language. And they do talk about recusing conflict of interest, but that's the only exception they have to the yes or no rule. And then the last one is about filling vacancies. And this again is a question of just somehow reconciling the state statutes pertaining to the Board of Education and our charter. There is a state statute that basically talks about how boards of education fill their vacancies. And then we have something which is different in the statute or in the charter that says how boards of education will fill their vacancies. And if they could, now the thing that makes it very difficult is in the state statutes, some state statutes, the charter trumps, excuse the term, and some state statutes, the charter can't replace. And just to a novice, meaning those like me who are just on the Board of Education, we can't tell which statute is which, whether we have to go with the statute or we have to go with the charter. And so if they could make that clear, review the state statute and then make it clear in the charter, that we indeed are supposed to ignore the state statute, that would be very helpful to us. And that's it, no more.
So I guess what I'd like to do is get a sense of whether if we were to remove, I guess, put forward a motion to pass these, and then if people are uncomfortable with specific pages or specific pieces of it, remove it and then save it. We can put those aside and discuss them next time and figure out what it is that needs to be revised before next time. Would everybody be comfortable with doing it that way?
Ready?
I'm ready.
I move that the Board of Education approve the charter revision considerations.
Second.
All right, Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, Mr. Cruson seconds it. I guess, is there anything anybody would like to remove from this packet for further discussion? Nope. All right. All those in favor of the packet as presented? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. That passes unanimously. So we shall pass on this packet. Thank you, everybody, for doing this. I know it was a lot to go through.
Yeah, may I just make a comment real quick?
Yes.
I just want to thank you, Dr. Kuhn. Thank you, Mrs. Zakowski, for your work on this. I would imagine it took countless hours, and it's very appreciated, and I understand exactly how hard you worked, and I just want to thank you for that effort. It means a lot. Both of you, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I went cross-eyed at times, so yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, we're a little bit nerdy on this charter revision stuff, though. All right. I think that brings us to our public participation. So I don't know if anybody on the line would like to make a comment, address the board at this time. You can unmute yourself using *6 and let it be known that you'd like to speak. And I'm not seeing anybody unmuting. So we will